Hi, today I'd like to talk with you about the import-export module in Shopware. I'll talk about what makes it so useful. So, you'll get a significant time savings with it. Many people aren't aware of that, which is why many don't use it. But it's actually an ultra-powerful tool, and you can do so much with it. Because, as the name suggests, you can import data into Shopware, but also pull it back out and export it. But then, what's the advantage here? I can simply add products in the admin or an order in your shop. Well, with it, you can process large amounts of data. For example, let's say, hey, export all products for me. And then you have a file where all this data is present and you can just adjust it. For example, common practice is also that you download certain products that you want to have. Now you already have an adjustment in mind that you want to make, and many people just go ahead, use the AI of their choice, attach the file and say, hey, here, do this. And then the file is just uploaded. So, those are workflows that you can use. Of course, you can also open the CSV or XML file in a program of your choice. For this, you can use Excel or others. There's also LibreOffice or just spreadsheet tools to view and adjust them. With that, you can of course edit things extremely quickly. Let's imagine we want to adjust the prices of 100 products. Then that's not so easy in the administration because we have to open every single product again. And with the import-export tool, we have the possibility to have everything in one file at a glance without having to click into the individual products. We can adjust it, upload it, and that's it. Of course, it's always important that with import-export, we're working with a lot of data that we're adjusting. When we adjust the data, it can of course also override a part that you might not want to lose at all, or you make a mistake in the process. Accordingly, I personally always recommend making a backup before every import so that you don't break anything. You can then restore your backup. Everything will be as before. After that, you can see, hey, what was maybe wrong with my profile or with my import file that caused the problem? I'd say let us continue and go into the admin now. Let's take another look at it in detail. Once in the administration, we find our import-export module in the settings. Okay, and here the whole thing is of course nicely broken down once. We find all our different modules here, and there under automation, import-export can be found. So now we actually have 3 tabs here that we need to understand, okay? We have import, we have export, and we have the profiles. In the import tab, we naturally want to add data to Shopware, for example, new products that we want to include in our product range. We could then just upload them here. But of course, we could also edit the products. We can always select the file here. And it's important, of course, when we click here, that we always use a file that Shopware also understands. And Shopware works here with what are called profiles. That means there are basically profiles. In these, you'll find various datasets that, when grouped together, represent a certain object type. Okay, so to summarize, that could mean we have the product profile, and these products always need, for example, a UUD in the database, they need a name, maybe they also need a price, and things like that. And that is essentially the profile of a product. It's very important to understand that. Because we can, of course, create our own mapping from different datasets and our own profiles to perhaps upload data that isn't even available here in the standard version yet. If we take a look through the standard profiles here, we can already see default category, default customer, default media. So we have a lot of things we can upload, products, properties, and so on, which we can then simply feed into Shopware via a very simple file. We see here that there are currently no imports that have taken place yet. If I were to upload something here, a display would also appear again, saying, hey, at such and such a time you made an import here, right? It's basically like a little log. Exactly, so that is how you would select your data here. I can say, for example, I'll take the default product template, could then also say whether I only want to import products or also variants, can then click on Start Import here, and then the whole thing runs right through. The data is then available in Shopware. Next, of course, we will talk about the export point. So usually, it's often the case that I don't necessarily write new data, but I want to edit existing data in some way. That is the most common workflow. And there it's super easy to export the data first. That means I could say here, for example, hey, before I build a whole file now in which I, for example, gather all the product information and then maintain it all in Excel, to then subsequently make a CSV file out of it that I can then upload and so on. Let's just choose the easy way and export a profile with products first, and just take the default profile there. And I can then also simply download it, adjust it, and upload it again in the same way. So I no longer have to worry about whether the column name is correct or so. Because that is, of course, an important thing at the end of the day, that the datasets are assignable, that is, assignable for Shopware, right? So if we don't make sure that the profile is the same, we can import the data again afterwards. But it's quite simple once you've done it a few times in your daily routine. We could also say here, for example, I want to export the product variants as well, or just not. Then a warning appears. Things are then explained, and I could click on Start Export here now. And now you can always see here, okay, that was just initiated. We also see which profile is being exported here right now, and the whole thing is being processed. I have many products in the shop here now. Oh no, only 50 after all. I actually made a mistake. That's not that many. And now we could go here and download the file directly. We can view the profile again. Hey, what datasets are actually in there? Is the file even fitting for me? And I could also view the log information again. So, as I said, when was this created, for instance? The file will also remain here for now. That means you can also download it again later. Exactly, it's definitely very, very practical. I also use it for checking, for example, when I've just imported fresh data. Instead of clicking through the whole front end, I also like to export them again. So, it's always a bit of a matter of taste. There are also many who just look at it directly in the front end first. I export it and just see, okay, does what I entered match what I would expect here? So, often, of course, if you want to make it easier, just open the respective things in the front end, or in the respective sales channel where you offer or display the products or categories, properties, and so on. Hey, and then, last but not least, we have our profiles here. And here we can, of course, go and say, okay, what is there? What does it actually look like now? So now I'll click on our product profile here, for example. Okay, most things we can actually still derive relatively easily here. So we have a technical name. Shopware probably needs that internally somehow. We have an object type. We always need that, of course. Which dataset should be processed? And then we have, what do we use it for? Import and exporting. Then there are things like delimiters and so on. If you want to edit them, that's no problem at all, of course. You should just be aware of it. Later during import, that these delimiters must be used again when using the profile. All things that can be derived relatively easily, I would say, by simply reading through them. Accordingly, I don't want to go into too much detail. Next we have the assignments, and now it gets a bit more interesting and also tricky. And I notice again and again from our customers and partners that questions often arise there. What do we see here now? Essentially, this is a so-called mapping, an assignment that takes place here. We have here, for example, okay, in our profile the whole thing is called ID. And we want the database entry of our products where the ID is located. So, you can actually derive all of that here for now. Then there are things, for example, where the whole thing, in terms of the name, doesn't fit together quite so easily anymore, but you still quickly figure out what that means here. For example, we have the translation default name here. This is a column in the database that displays the name of the product for the respective translation. And accordingly, it's now just called name in the CSV file. But we want to either, well, download or upload the column from the table, import or export it. So that's how it goes through here. And of course, once we've built up a better understanding of the whole thing, we can also add columns ourselves or adjust the column names of the file afterwards. That means I could also just say here that this shouldn't be the ID anymore, but for example the number, so that my employees, when I send them the file and they want to adjust it, can more easily understand what is meant by it. That would be one thing, right? Or here, We don't call it the parent ID, but we call it something else, so that whoever edits the profile can manage it later. And then we have advanced settings again on the far right side. I'll go into the assignments again briefly in a moment, where we'll also see again, okay, there are identities and identifiers for this. And now the whole thing is becoming a bit, let's say, less transparent or harder to understand if you want to create a profile yourself. What do I have to assign here now? What do I do here? And actually, it's relatively simple. So the important thing is, as I said, to remember that we always want to address a column in the database. That means, if in doubt, I could also just go into my SQL or whatever MariaDB. Open the Shopware database and see what the column I actually want for my product is called, right? Then you'd have to find the respective table and enter it there once. Or we'll switch briefly to the documentation, because there's a very, very useful point there that will quickly help you understand these things. Because here we find a great summary of our object types and also the things an object requires. So, that's just said for now. What exactly does that mean? We're going now in the documentation article for our import-export directly to the advanced settings. Now you're initially a bit overwhelmed with, let's say, info on the right side. There are many, let's say, individual topics here, but essentially you don't always need all of them, just one. Yes, here the whole story with the identifiers and the second unique identifiers is explained first. Right, so it says here again, previously the import always required a UID to assign the data records to the correct identities. And now it's like, for example, that with the second unique identifier, i.e. the identifier, you can determine yourself, yes, how the data records are mapped to or with the identity. It all sounds a bit complicated, but if you take a look at it here, it's relatively easy to understand. And with the standard profiles, you don't have to adjust anything yourself. That's very important to understand. You don't have to do anything for now, right? You can just import, export. This is usually only relevant for you if you really want to create your own profile. Regarding the custom profiles themselves, the question often arises, hey, somehow my import or my export isn't working. I'm getting error messages spat out here. Then that usually has two causes. Either your profile doesn't fit, yes, so the object type doesn't get the data it's actually supposed to get. For example, actually, and this is applying to almost every object type, so whether it is a product, a customer, a category, an order, it always needs, for example, an ID that is assigned, so that you also know which product in the database it's about, for example. So you can see here, for example, that products always need a text ID, a product number, a stock, and a name. You'll always need those. Yeah, that means no matter when you create a product, these data points are mandatory fields. And if you do an import and any of that is missing, then you're going to get an error. Similarly, you can't create a profile if one of these data points is missing. That means if you want to make a new profile for products, where you want to, let's go in here, you want to adjust the EN number for every product, for example. Okay, that would be an example, because you got them later on and now you want to maintain them. Then these values still have to be in your new profile for the EN number, if the EN number isn't already in a standard profile. And here we always have the nice opportunity to take a good look at that in the documentation. And we have a helpful overview of the mandatory fields that exist, because it's really important to make sure you always take a quick look at that beforehand. For example, I want to click on a profile for orders now, so I just go here to the object type orders. And then I see here ID, sales channel ID, order date time, and state ID are the ones we always need. And accordingly, they should always be filled with information, both in the profile and during the import. Otherwise, we'll get errors at that point. Here, you'll also find a few case studies in the documentation. Of course, it would go beyond the scope of this video if we did an import or an export for every single profile here. But I think you've got the basics down by now. And we can definitely say that it's actually relatively simple. So let me summarize everything up about the tool. We can import data and export it. There are profiles, and they basically describe what an object type, like products, customers, or categories, looks like. And there are important mandatory fields. Without those, the whole thing won't work. We can see all in the docs. There's a nice overview. You can also look them up yourself, but that's always a bit of manual effort. So, this is usually the way to go. And I wish you a lot of success now with the import-export tool. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and bye-bye.